Hey, this is Todd. Often in different venues, I've brought up the use of or the reading of Played by the Apocalypse rules as a good thing for a GM, regardless of whether they're playing Played by the Apocalypse games or D&D or some other RPG, because I feel like that system really lays out a lot of tools for the GM and prescribes sort of mechanically things for the GM to do that a game like 5th edition doesn't necessarily do. One of the ones that I think is great is Dungeon World, which here's my beat up copy. And in particular, what I wanted to talk about quickly today was the DM moves and what they mean, how you can use them, and what they do for you. Everything in these books, as far as characters and everything, comes down to what they call moves. Characters have moves, monsters have moves. And in fact, as the GM, you will do moves for creatures. But let me read here what they say about when a move is to use. So whenever everyone looks at you to see what happens, choose one of these. Each move is something that occurs in the fiction of the game. They aren't code words or special terms. Use up their resources literally means expend the resources of the characters. And then they give you some examples. Use a monster, danger, or location move. Reveal an unwelcoming truth or unwelcome truth. Show signs of an approaching threat. Deal damage. Use up their resources, etc. So deal damage isn't one that would usually show up in a game unless it's in a D&D type game, unless it's really a trap. It's just a way of basically the way combat works. In this game, it's more about the move dealing damage than as a reaction to a character action than rolling the sort of antagonistic dice back and forth and having creatures make attacks. But they give you a list of them, and they say don't ever say the name of the move. You treat it as it would in the fiction, and obviously you're going to follow up with prompting them what to do. Then it goes through and gives you sort of a rundown. I'm just going to read one of these. Here we go. Offer an opportunity with or without cost. Show them something that they want: riches, power, glory. If you want, you can associate some cost with it too, of course. Remember to lead with the fiction. You don't say this area isn't dangerous, so you can make a camp here if you're willing to take the time. You make it a solid fictional thing and say, Hellfirth's blessings still hang around the shattered altar. It's a nice, safe spot, but the chanting from the ritual chamber is getting louder. What do you do? So that's a perfect example in that example of something you could do in reaction to something that the players have done. In that case, what the example is talking about is perhaps they need a place to camp and take a short rest. It comes up in D&D all the time. And you can see that you've laid out this opportunity, and it's insinuated that there's a price that they may have to pay. If they decide to camp there, this seems safe. At the same time, time may be ticking. If they're there to stop the ritual and the ritual's ongoing, they have to decide whether they think they have enough time to take that short rest or continue on. The reason why I like the DM moves is because they really spell out, and I don't. It's not meant to be all inclusive. I'm sure you could come up with your own moves, and when you look at different powered by the apocalypse engine games, they will come up with moves that are specific to the setting and the type of campaign that they're running. But often I see on Reddit and other things, DMs are asking kind of what to do. My players did this. What do I do? They yelled at the Duke. They killed this person. This happened. What do I do? And these moves are great resource for looking at the consequences. And the consequences, I think, is the consequences in general are sort of the main currency as a GM. Your players are going to do things, and then you're reacting to them, and you're delivering those consequences. But for new DMs, it can be something of a stumbling block, both in what to do and also sort of how far to take it. Because I think what can happen when you want to deal in those consequences is you want to maybe move too fast, or you want to do something and you want to respond right away, or you want to respond, but maybe your response is a little bit more than the situation actually warrants. And I think part of that process of thinking out what you want to do, obviously you're playing the game, you're in the moment. It can be easy to jump too far or to jump too big. They insulted the Duke. Oh, the guards come in and now you're arrested. Well, yeah, okay, you could do that, but maybe think about what might be more appropriate. And of course, in some places, yes, it may be appropriate. You insult the Duke, you get arrested. That may totally be appropriate in a Game of Thrones setting. If you're in Joffrey's court and you insult Joffrey, chances are he might be asking somebody to disembowel you there. Fair enough. But in a lot of cases, it may not be that severe, and you wanna play with that. By looking at things as moves and looking at what they mean, it kind of gives you a chance to break down how are these different things that I could do, and you start to think about, well, which one of these fits the situation and the severity and everything else I want to do, and then go down that path. So to me, I like it because it gives you this list you can look at in the moment and say, okay, I need something. Let me go down this list. Because what you're supposed to do these moves is you're supposed to find the ones that are most appropriate. So you might find a move in a social setting or a social action's taking place. So you might want to look for a move that fits that same social setting. So, for example, someone insults the Duke. So you go in here and you pull out, and I'm not saying you have to carry a Dungeon World book with you. I just happen to have it out. But you could write these down or again make up your own. I'm looking down this list. Okay, so they insulted the Duke. I could use a monster, danger, or location move, and that might be appropriate. Location move, perhaps, but I look at this one. I say, okay, reveal an unwelcome truth. That one sounds good for a social situation. That one sounds right up the alley of something that a Duke or somebody else could do to kind of turn it on them. They've just done something or said something unkind. The Duke could call them on the carpet for something. And if I look at their little description of this move, it says, an unwelcome truth is a fact the players wish wasn't true. And they give some ones that are interesting that don't refer to this situation. They talk about, okay, that a room has been trapped maybe, or that a helpful goblin is actually a spy. These are things that you would pull out. So you could see the application of this move in different areas. In this particular instance, I could see it as, let's say the party was bargaining for help from this Duke, and maybe the Duke was going to give it to them. Maybe the Duke was totally on board, but then somebody put their foot in their mouth, and now the help has been rescinded. Or perhaps there was some other piece of information that the party maybe didn't wish was revealed. Maybe there's something about something they've done that the Duke then reveals, or somebody else at the court reveals. Here I'm using that term, the unwelcome truth, to look about maybe setting the party back socially. It's something they could do. Now, I could try a different move. I could look at that and say, oh, a location move. Well, what's a location move be like for this situation? What kind of moves could a location like the Duke's stronghold have? Well, maybe it's just that they're not welcome there anymore. They get booted out and now they can't come back. That's a location move. I think the idea here is in Dungeon World, you would go and maybe write these out in advance. For our purposes, if we're just using it for inspiration, we may just want to think about what is an appropriate response from the location. Again, we could have done it just from the Duke. The Duke could have addressed this himself and just said, get out or something, right? So there isn't necessarily one answer. You're using these for inspiration. So you can look at these and see which one appeals to you, which one calls out to you. In my case, I like the unwelcome truth. I think I looked at it as, oh, this is kind of a social conflict, a social tension. So I'm going to try to ratchet that up and use that to apply more social pressure to the situation. Maybe the Duke was going to give some aid, then someone puts their foot in their mouth. Now maybe they're not going to, or it's going to have a price attached to it that the party may not want to pay. Or maybe I invoke the someone else says you cannot you can't talk to a Duke like this in the ducal seat, get out, which might be a location move. Or the Duke could himself rebuff them, which I could say, well, that's one of his moves. Any number of things, but the idea is that these moves really crystallize in sort of a mechanical sense these things you can do. And I think for new DMs, one, they give you permission to say, oh, I can do all these different things. Oh, this is great, because maybe you hadn't thought about it. It seems from the amount of questions I see on Reddit of DMs looking for what to do in response to player actions, I think sometimes having a list of here are these appropriate sort of categories of responses is helpful. Oh, I can do this. Oh, I can have this thing. Oh, I can do like that. I think can help you jog your mind. The other thing to keep in mind, and this is suggested by the moves, but even if you using it for inspiration, is the moves should fit what's happening. They should also they're not supposed to be breaking the game or punishing, I would say. So I would say you have to separate the consequences from the punishments. Yes, the Duke may want to punish the players or the characters for insulting them. And maybe you as the GM feel like this is a boneheaded move. I want to punish them. But that's really separate from the consequences. The consequence should be, okay, the Duke has been insulted, what do they do? And then it stays within the rules of the game. So maybe the Duke calls out to his guards. The guards don't then automatically have the players in their grasp. They still have to go through those steps. The players have a chance to see the guards coming and put up a fight, or jump out a stained glass window and try to get out of dodge, or try to make a plea for forgiveness or apologize.
And I'll whisper, no.
You use it to keep the game going. You're not moving outside the realms of the fiction. So things aren't happening outside the rules of the game, so to speak, which I think separates the consequences from punishment. I think when you want to punish players, you're looking to do something and you're doing it on a meta level that you're willing to bend or break the game construct to get this thing you want. So, you grab them and suddenly you're in jail, and the players didn't really have any chance to do anything about it. Like, we're in jail now. Okay, that to me, I put as that's a punishment. You wanted to punish the players maybe on a meta level and their characters, and so you dropped them in the situation, but you didn't give them the way to respond in game the way they would. Consequences, you're playing it out in the game. So if the Duke calls for guards, you see how many guards are there, you see how far away they are, maybe you roll initiative just since the timing might be important, and then the players have opportunity to respond and they can keep going, and then you keep playing on those consequences. As Dungeon World says, let your moves snowball. So you start off with that unwelcome truth, as I have, that the Duke has decided maybe not to grant this request that they thought was coming, or that they're not going to get as much help as they thought they were, something along those lines. Then the players have a chance to do something, and then depending on that goes, you can escalate it. So then maybe you do the location move, which is somebody at the court being outraged and suggesting that they should just be booted out of the stronghold. And then again, you can keep going. And then maybe they get to the Duke, who uses one of, in a sense, a move on his part, which I guess in the D&D sense, maybe it's not, it's not a move. It's, you're there. In this case, the monster move isn't hard coded in a sense like it is in Dungeon World. In Dungeon World, you'll get cases like, I think, fire beetle, special qualities, full of flames, undermine the ground, burst from the earth, spray forth flames. These are kind of things that they're thinking about. And, in D&D, these would be specific abilities. Here, they're more general, because it's more working at sort of a narrative level than sort of a gritty, I don't know if gritty is the right word, but it's not trying to nail it down to specifics. It leaves it more up to the GM and the table as sort of a narrative thing to figure out what those mean. But you can see how you can kind of take those, and maybe the way I would map those onto an NPC like a Duke is, what are the things the Duke is looking for? What are the qualities this Duke has? And then take those qualities and say, okay, now they've insulted the Duke. Given the qualities of the Duke, how is he likely to respond with the sort of things that he has? So for a Duke, yeah, he doesn't have undermine the ground, but maybe he has call the guards, right? Reinforcements, issue a ducal decree, outlaw. So I can look at those and I say, okay, these are things that Dukes can do. How does that fit the situation? But the idea of using the moves in this sense is really for inspiration, really to get you thinking about, as a DM, what are the consequences of what they've done. And again, I like the moves in a sense because it tells you what you're allowed to do. And in a good sense, I think you can often get caught up in, as a DM, you can do anything you want, right? But sometimes that can actually freeze a new GM, a new DM, because they don't really know that they almost need permission to do what they want to do. And the DM's guide and some of the official resources, they come from the aspect that you can do anything you want. So kind of here are these things where sometimes where I think where these rules are coming from is, here we're going to prescribe to you the things we can do. So we're going to show you all these things that you can do, and then you have permission to do them. And so I think they're really useful, again, whether you're reading or whether you're playing a D&D. I think it's, as a GM, regardless of the game you're playing, take a look at those GM moves. Dungeon World is one that's taking on the kind of fantasy genre, D&D type genre, from a different angle. So it has moves that are going to map better to D&D than maybe some of the other ones that are dealing with social situations, or, X-Files type things, or sci-fi, whatever. But all the books I feel like that I've read anyway have had great DM advice. Particularly, like I said, I like the moves. So think about the moves when you're getting ready to do your mixed game. Maybe write them down on a piece of paper or a note card, tape it to the inside of your GM screen that you can look at and think about, okay, what have the players done? And then kind of you can just eyeball that list, and then some of them will come up and say, "Oh, this one seems really appropriate. Let me pick that one." Find the one that's most appropriate, make ones up on your own, keep adding them to your list. You could have a whole bunch of different things that you want. They tend to be, like I said, the ones in the book are pretty general because you're meant to sort of look inside there, and either take what's been written in the material or what you've designed beforehand and pull your moves from there. If you're designing things in kind of dungeon world, your location, you're going to write down the moves in advance. NPCs, you're going to write down their moves. Creatures, you're going to write down your moves. If you're playing D&D with those in advance, you could do that as part of your prep and say, here are the things that are part of that, and kind of write down those same kind of general moves. Or you can just think about what kind of place is this person, creature, what are their motivations, what do they want, and then marry that with looking at sort of the list of moves and saying, okay, what would they do? Keep ratcheting the tension up, but look at what they're doing and try to keep things on the level of the response. So if they've done a small thing, you don't respond with a giant thing. If they've done something giant, then of course go bigger. And of course, the more latitude you give to keep playing, the party naturally is going to keep rising things up. Players have a tendency to double down on ideas, good, bad, or ugly. So you're gonna be able to get to those high tension places, but by taking the steps, by using the moves to keep going and doing that kind of response and move and response and move, no one's going to feel like they were railroaded into it. No one's going to feel like they did something and they felt like you had an agenda and just blew it up. They're going to be able to follow those steps. They're going to be able to see it going. So anyway, I just to wrap up, dungeon DM moves from Dungeon World or other, powered by the apocalypse type games, I think are great. Check them out. I think there are tons of resources for those games online. There are lots of discussion about moves and how to use them. Obviously, the specifics are more geared towards that system, but I think you can take the general vibe of it and take it and use it as inspiration for using it in your D&D or other role-playing game. If you use them already or you do use them in your next session, let me know in the comments or on Reddit or somewhere, and I'd love to hear about how it works for you. Other than that, I will talk to you later.